In this video, our SAP Analytics Cloud product experts will demonstrate the main features of our new release. Feel free to jump straight to the features you're interested in by using the timestamps in the description below. Let's dive in and hear from our SAP Analytics Cloud product experts.
Hi everyone, I'm Sean McGregor, a user experience and user assistance lead for SAP Analytics Cloud. And what I'd like to share with you today is our new contextual help and learning experience using SAP Companion. With the introduction of this feature, all users will now be able to explore the user interface with contextual hotspot help, watch embedded videos, and also complete self-directed interactive tutorials. But let's jump right into SAP Analytics Cloud to see this in action. So to launch the new help experience, you click the question mark icon in the upper right of the shell bar, and this will open the companion side panel. This panel contains content specific to assist you with questions you have on the current screen. So right now you're on the home screen, but if you switch to a different tool like the calendar, you can see that the contents of the side panel update automatically as you switch screens. Now there are multiple help tiles on any panel. These help tiles contain short descriptions of key UI elements on the screen and are linked to the UI elements with visual hotspots. That are those question mark icons you see on the page. You can either click on the tile itself or mouse over and click on one of the hotspots. And here you can find help popovers with summary information, along with a link to a relevant full help article on the SAP Help portal. Also on the Help Topics panel, you can filter. So if you enter a keyword like admin, it'll filter the help tiles by the keyword you put in there. And you can also find any relevant videos that are related to the current screen you're on. And click on one of those video tiles, for example here, how to create planning events using the calendar, and you'll be able to switch to full screen mode and then watch that video tutorial. Now on the right hand side of the panel, there are multiple tabs. If you click on the second tab, this is the Learning tab. And from here, you can find a button that will take you to a list of all the tutorials available for SAP Analytics Cloud. A community button that takes you to the SAP community page where you can find access to SAP and community experts and blogs and content. Then also individual interactive tutorials that are relevant for the screen you're on. So here we're on the calendar. If I click the first tutorial called Creating Data Locking Tasks, it'll load that tutorial directly in a separate browser window. And from here, you can start the tutorial. And then in an interactive manner with clickable screenshots, you can walk through step by step this task and do some self-directed learning. Now, if we go back to the home screen, if you want to learn about new and updated features after a tenant update, like today, we provide two shortcuts to this information. The first is the What's New banner. That's the blue banner at the top here, but also the Notification Center entry. If you click either of these, for example, if I click the What's New banner, it'll open the new help experience directly into the What's New tab. And from here, you can navigate and look at different releases to find out what's new and changed. And there's also a button on the top, which will open up the SAP Help portal to take a look at past quarterly releases. And then finally, a couple things back on the Help Topics tab. At the bottom of every panel and every screen, there's a link to further resources. These are links to additional SAP websites like the Knowledge Base or the Customer Influence portal. And at the top of every panel on every screen is a link to open the help documentation on the SAP Help portal. And these links are contextually relevant to the screen you're in, so you can do a deeper dive and find more information and just continue on your journey for more help. So that's all for this feature. Thanks for watching.
With Q4 update, we have also provided an option to display a net total in stacked bar chart. Now, this is available for combination of stacked bar and line chart, stacked bar and or column chart, excluding the 100% chart and Marimekko chart. Net total will consider your positive and negative values and will show you the net value. Let's look at the demo to quickly understand. So here I have a stack chart which displays my sales and my returns. Now here you will see that the total is shown as the total of sales, but I want to see a total of sales plus returns. So whatever is my returns has to be excluded. So all I have to do is go to my styling panel. Towards the bottom, I can see net totals. So once I enable it, it will start reflecting the net totals. So for example, in 2021 Q1, the total sales that I have made is 9 million, which is 11 million sales minus 2 million return. Thank you. Hi. As part of QRC for 2023 release, we have released one, one of the major features of enabling copy paste across tabs in Story. Let's look at the demo. So here we have a story which is looking at the financial information, and I want to copy this page into a new story. So all I can do is I can click on copy, go into the new story, click Control V or paste, and my page will be copied.
As part of Q4 2023 release, we now support area-enriched dimension for Geomaps. Please note that this is only supported for core layer and for optimized stack only. Now let's look at the demo for this. So this is my base model which has the location dimension. Location dimension has longitude and latitude information. Now let me add properties to it. So I'm adding country. So let me add the description as country. I also want to add region as a property. So while I'm selecting region, you can see that country is disabled. While I'm selecting region, you can see that country is disabled. This means that the same property cannot be duplicated. So let me create it. So now that I have created two properties, country and region, I can look at the supported geolocations. So clicking on the I button, it allows you to, SAC allows you to download the supported locations. So this is how the file looks like. It has country, region, sub-region, etc. So this is a CSV file that SAC provides. Now let me go into the data model and add the properties. So here I can see that these locations are from United States of America. So let me add United States of America. I can just quickly cross-validate if this is the same naming convention in the file. So I'm filtering it out on United States. I can also filter on the region. Let's say New York. So here it is United States and New York. So let me quickly correct it. United States, New York. I know that Los Angeles is part of California, so let me add this location also. I'm saving my model. Once the model is saved, let me go back to my geomap. So here you can see that a geomap with bubble layer has been enabled, added to my visualization. So let me go to the location dimension. So when I go to location, I can see that it is only the geo point that is available. Area-enriched is not available. So let me quickly go back to choropleth layer. Now I can see that the area enriched dimension is available because it is supported only for choropleth layer. Here I can drill it down by region now. So if I drill down by region, I can see that New York and California is properly highlighted. That's the geo-enriched area dimension. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jiedan. Here I would like to introduce the feature highlights that we are delivering with the Q4 QRC releases in the category of the story extensibility. One of the highlights is a composite widget. As a reusable building block can be created and consumed like any other standard widgets in story. For example, you can create a story header as a composite, or the left navigation menu as a composite, or the collapse lane chart as a composite. Once you defined this as a composite, you can save that in the SAC file repository. Composite is an artifact in SAC file repository. This artifact also has on its authorization. Administrator can define which users can create composites, which users are only allowed to consume composite. Story features like story filter, bookmark, theme, etc. can be applied to the widgets inside the composites. With this concept, you can modularize your stories, you can make your maintenance and change management much more easier, and can speed up your story creation time. The next highlight is that we are supporting the advanced features for converting a classic responsive page to an optimized responsive page. So after converting all these advanced features like scripting, pulse refresh options, pop-up widget, responsive rule configuration, device preview, data change insights are supported in the optimized responsive page as well. The same like a canvas page. And it could be that in some edge cases, after conversion, your optimized responsive page look a little bit different than the classic one. In that case, you might need to do some manual adjustment. Now have a look into go to demo part. So first, I would like to show you the composite. So you see here an example, the composite is defined. For example, it's a header is defined here. You can see that for defining the composite, it's the same like you are defining a story. You have the asset part and you have the outline part. Important is that you have functions and events. These two are responsible for that you can use a composite to dynamically to exchange the logic with the stories to be able to communicate between composite and also the stories. So that's, for example, how is the header could look like, and you define it and then you save it as an artifact composite and also save in a particular folder. I have another example is data contained composite. Like here I have a collapse lane chart. Then you see I have put two chart here, and I also open close button with some scripting, and here full screen original size button with some scripting. Here is also important to define functions and events, and then I save that in the file repository. So once the composites are defined, and I as a story designer, and I can go to the asset panel here and to import this composite into my design time. Once it's imported, then I can use a drag and drop that into the canvas to build the story. Now let's have a look into this story runtime. We can see that this navigation menu is a composite, so I can use that to navigate to the different story pages. And then I'll go back again. Here, go to overview. And here, header is a composite. And the collapse lane chart is a composite. Can open, can close it. Once I open it, that's also full screen button can make it full screen or close it. So that's all basically is a composite, and here part is also a composite. And once actually your stories can be divided into different parts and leverage the composite, and that we will be able to see under the story is also have a standardized look and feel, like the header is always the same, and if the collapse area is always the same workflow and also the same logic. You see, the composite will be able to help you to standardize your story. And here we can also to add some filter, for example, and for this story filters can be applied to the composite also widgets inside the composite itself. We will be able to see that we choose a product and also the widgets inside the composite, and it also gets a filter. So the story filter working the same as a bookmark as well. Now let's go to the design time again, and we want to go to the outline. Also with the composite, you see the widgets in the outline is much clean, much structured, because here I only actually see that's my composite table. Here is my composite chart. If you go to the composite and the table, and with the right panel, you will be able to configure these properties. Now let's make a change. For example, that I want to make change in the composite header. I just add image. So I prepared image. I want to make this image visible in the header area, and then basically I move my text area a little bit on the right, and then click on the save button. So here I add image in my header. Now let's go to the story runtime. Click basically refresh the story, and what we can expect is that these images from the header composite will automatically also be adapted into the story, because this story leverage this composite. And I can navigate to the second page. It's the same, you see, without going to the story design time to do anything, and I only need to in the header part to do some changes, and then my story will adapt the change automatically. So you see how easily you can make a change to your stories, for example. And let's also make an example. For example, I have a collapse lane chart, right? And in the collapse lane chart, I have a function called set measure. Means in the story, I can set different measures based on this data model. So we can see that currently the measure is on the cost of the goods sold. Now let's go to the design time. Let's leverage these functions. I go to the initialization event. Currently, we can see on the story runtime, it basically shows the cost of goods sold. So let's go to the page. Let me show you cost of goods sold. Go to design time. Here we only need to add 2 lines of code, and then we can point this composite to another key figure instead of cost of goods sold. So first, and we don't want to show cost of goods sold anymore, and then we want to basically set the chart title to the sales discount, and we also add this functions set measure to the sales discount, and I can here save the story, and then I go to the story runtime again here to refresh the story. Then we will be able to see this collapse lane of the chart now shows measure sales discount instead of the cost of goods sold before. So here, using the interface function capability of the composite, you will be able to dynamically to point your composite, like here, also to the different measures, to the different dimensions, and also the filters. So that is the power of the composite. So once you create it, save in the SAC file repository, and you can use in your story, and it will help you to extremely to make your story more structured, and also to help you to make your maintenance much more efficient later on. So another highlight is that this conversion. So let me first show you one example stories that we are actually still on the classic responsive pages. So we can see that that's still a classic story which contains the canvas and also the responsive pages. And then now I will be able to go to basically the Save button and click on this Converting to the Optimized Design Experience. So here I can choose Save As. Here is also a text that shows in some edge cases the converted layout must not be identical to the classic one. So click on the Save As. Under 3, give a number, and then I will be able to click on the OK, and then I have converted a classic responsive page to the optimized responsive page. We can see on the outline part now. We can see on the outline part, you see Canvas page anyway, how the whole scripting capabilities are supported. Now to the responsive pages, and you can see that all scripting capabilities are supported as well, including other theming capabilities and so on. So that is the 2 highlights I want to share with you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Marwan Farshishi and I am Product Manager for SAP Analytics Cloud. In this video, I will present you the Widget add-on. Widget add-on is a new feature which gives the ability to the story designer working in the optimized story experience to use the Widget add-on to extend and leverage the built-in chart in SAC. Also giving the ability to change 2 main extension points, which are the tooltip and the plot area, by overwriting the existing default styling. So let's now jump to the demo to know more about this feature. For that, I prepared already a story which containing built-in chart. I mean by that normal bar chart and also some custom widget. So let's focus with this bar chart. You see here we have the default tooltip. Now I will go and edit the tooltip and also the plot area. For that, I will do some modification. First, I will select my chart and then I will edit the dimension from location to product and also the chart orientation from vertical to horizontal. Plus, I will also show the Y axis in order to see the product name. And then we will change and edit, I would say customize the tooltip and the plot area. For that, there is a new section called Custom Add-on. As you can see from the right, I will open the section and then I will enable the custom add-ons. And then first thing, I will customize my tooltip. As I said, we have 2 types, 2 extension points, the tooltip and the plot area. I will start with the tooltip. I will select my widget add-on and then press OK. And now I will mouse over and we see that our tooltip is different. Here we can see some new icon and some new also color. Now let's customize the plot area. And as you can see, now we see different shape of our bar chart plus small icons in front of every product name. In addition, you can also have the possibility to customize your widget add-on on the design time by adding some properties. You can also enable and disable by saving the tooltip and the plot area that you already selected. So now let's save our story and also run the story to see the result. So with this new feature, I was able to customize my bar chart by editing the plot area and also the tooltip using this new feature. So the question is how we can upload our widget add-on into SAC. For that, there is a new section called Widget add-on. I will show you right now. So you redirect yourself to story, and then next to custom widget, there is a new tab called Widget add-on, and here you can upload and add all your widget, and then you can use them directly in your story. Thank you so much.
Hello everybody, my name is Bettina Denonville. I am Product Manager for Data Analyzer, and in the next minutes I'll present you the new innovations as part of the QRC Q4 release. On the table we give the ability to drag and drop from the Builder panel into the table. The supported objects are dimensions, display attributes, measure structure and the account structure. In the area of charts, we do support SAC new models, and we introduce two more chart types, the stacked bar and the stacked column chart. Now I'm going to switch to the live demo. I already opened a BW Live query model. First, I drag and drop product group from the available objects list directly to the rows. I do the same for a display attribute. I pick price and drag and drop it to the rows. On the columns, I pick calendar year month and drag and drop it underneath the measures. Alright, now I'm going to show you the chart improvements. For that, I switch to the stacked column chart. You see, table and chart always share the same query state, given that if you switch from table to chart, you automatically get a predefined chart setting. I deselect all measures because I want to see only revenue. I swap the dimensions because I want to have the calendar year month on the x-axis. I can show the chart as 100%. Now going back to table, you see that the drill down has changed compared to the initial table state because now it covers the last query state of the chart. Going back to chart, I now choose the stacked bar chart. You see the query state remains and it suits the chart requirements. You see, this is a new SAC model. You see the accounts, the measures, dimensions, and here you'll find all available chart types which are now supported for new models. That's it from my side for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
This version has improved the SAP ERP connection. Previously, this was one of the only remaining connections that was neither shareable nor usable with the new model, and we have fixed that in this version. So you can now share the connection when you share a model that has a low job that uses an ERP connection, and you can share the connection directly in the connection administration panel. And you can now use this connection with the new model type. There are no UX changes, so this is a behind the scenes. We made some architectural changes that allowed this connection to be shared.
Hello everyone, in this demo I shall demonstrate the ability to combine selection member type formulas with other formulas. These selection member type formulas include a lookup, a restrict, the SMA, which is simple moving average, we have CAGR, compound annual growth rate, and we have the YOY formulas as well, year over year. So in the past, modelers and planners needed to create numerous calculated measures in order to combine the lookup, restrict, YOY, CAGR and SMA formulas together. And with this feature, less calculated measures are needed in order to achieve the same result. So let's review some examples in greater details. So we'll start with our lookup example here. So here we have a lookup using a local currency amount using a date where we're looking up for the past 2 years. If we wanted to apply a calculation on top of this, we'd have to create another calculated measure to see our results. So now with this limitation lifted, we can actually append the calculation at the end of the lookup to achieve the same results. Next we have a restrict. We have a restricted measure here for local currency amount using a date of 2021, and we've created another calculated measure here for 2019. If we want to subtract 1 year away from the other, 2021 minus 2019, we'd have to create a third calculated measure to see our results. So now with this restriction lifted, we can actually combine the restrict formulas together to achieve the same results. So here we can see the comparison here with the restricted measure containing 3 calculated measures versus the compounded formula. So they show the same results here. We can actually also combine versions together. So for example, here we have a lookup showing budget, and we have another calculated measure here showing actual results. If we wanted to subtract actual from budget, we can see the results here. So that's 3 calculated measures, but now we can actually combine these all together into one formula where we've got budget minus actual to show the results. And you can actually see here the comparison of our 3 calculated measures versus our compounded, showing the same results. Similar behavior then is seen with SMA. We've got simple moving average, and we've appended a calculated measure, a subtotal calculation to the end of this. We have a CAGR, which has a lookup formula appended to the end as well. And finally, we have a YOY, which has a calculation appended. So just to note that breaking the syntax of a formula, any of these formulas, is not supported. So for instance, if I was to change this and maybe move the calculation inside the bracket, this actually in effect breaks the syntax, so that's not supported. So it must be appended at the end in order to be supported. So that's it for the demo. Thanks a lot for watching.
In this release, we now support larger parent-child hierarchies. Previously, if there were no parent-child hierarchies in a dimension, you could have 1 million members defined in that dimension. But if you had a parent-child hierarchy defined, you could only have 150,000 members in the parent-child hierarchy. With this release, we have made some algorithmic improvements to how we handle hierarchies in Analytics Cloud, and we have removed the 150,000 member restriction. So the rule now is if you have a dimension, you can have 1 million members regardless of whether or not there are any parent-child hierarchies in them. There are no user interface changes. This is all behind the scenes.
Hello everyone, today I'd like to introduce to you our new function called ToPeriod. Here we have a universal model and we have a day granularity here, and we'll just show you the level of the hierarchies here, which is year, quarter, period, which is month, week and day. So the ToPeriod function can be used against this level of date granularity. So if we just switch over to the calculation workspace, first of all, we just show the function help and the improvements that have been made here. So the dynamic time functions have actually been added to the functions help. They were previously not here. So we have our pre-existing formulas such as first, last, previous, next, current, last periods are included here. And now we have our new function called ToPeriod. And we can see here the ToPeriod function is defined as it sums the aggregated values over a given period, and it can be used only in conjunction with a lookup and a restrict. So now let's move over to the calculation workspace and just to look at the ToPeriod function in further detail. So we'll add a calculated measure, and I'm going to give it a name called Q to D calc. And I'm going to add in our TC day date dimension. And now I'm just going to create a lookup. And you can see the customer is guided using hints. So we'll type in day, and there are further new hints that have been provided here. So if I just type in the start of the function, we can see the list of the dynamic time dimensions here. So I can select the ToPeriod function, and if I press Control Space, I can see the level of granularities that are defined against the date dimension. So in this example, I want to use quarter. So if I drill down now onto the day granularity, I can drill down to quarter, and we can see results are displayed and they are accumulated from the quarter level of date granularity and lower. So if I drill down lower, we have months, and then we have weeks, and then we have days. So, and you can see that they are accumulated values. So some further examples here are year. So for year, we can actually see year values and all of the date granularities that are below that. So for month, we drill down to the month level of granularity, and we can see anything that's below that. So there's, for the first quarter there, January, February, March, and any granularities that are lower than that. Similarly with week. Okay, so we have week and day granularities, and then day, which is the lowest level of the hierarchy. I mean, you can see the results are only shown for the day level. That's at the lowest level. So at story level, these values can also be seen, and input enablement is also available. So that's it for the recording on ToPeriod. Thanks a lot for listening.
Hi, my name is Scott Godfrey. I'm one of the product managers with SAP Analytics Cloud. And I'm going to spend the next few moments talking to you about some of the new features we have coming in the planning area as part of our Q4 2023 QRC release. So the first thing I want to talk about is some enhancements we have coming to validation rules. And specifically, that's the ability to copy and paste in the validation configuration table. So of course, this will be helpful in scenarios where you have a large number of validation rules and or you want to manage them externally, say in Excel. And some of the characteristics of this are you'll have separate toolbar icons for the copy and paste operation. So this will allow you to either manipulate or copy and paste directly within the validation rule table itself, or to paste from an external source. The paste operation, including from an external system, should work regardless of whether you have the ID or the description toggled. So as long as your source are based on IDs, this will be for uniqueness reasons. When you copy and paste, it will resolve regardless of whether the IDs or the descriptions are displayed. And then finally, this feature will support keyboard shortcuts. So Control-C, Control-V, for example. So let's jump over and see this in action. So I'm in my validation rule table, and I have some rules that I've copied from Excel. They're on my clipboard. I'm going to go ahead and paste them into the table. You'll see that they pasted in as the ID. That's what they were in Excel. But if I delete that and then toggle the display to description, I can still paste in the same rules, and they will resolve based on the underlying IDs to the description. So that's from an external source, but I can just as easily, of course, copy and paste directly from within the table. And if I do that, I can go ahead and make changes to the record or records that I've pasted. And I can, of course, copy multiple records that I want. So before I copied one, here I copy multiple records. I can go ahead and make changes to those if I need to. So this is the copy and paste in the validation rule editor as part of our Q4 2023 QRC release. So the next thing I want to talk about is some improvements we have coming to the advanced formula script syntax as part of our Q4 release. And what we're introducing with Q4 is an explicit match and not match condition when you're comparing a dimension element to an equivalent attribute in another dimension. So up until this point, when you do an equal or not equal comparison, by default what's happening is it's doing Cartesian processing. However, in some scenarios, this may not get you the result that you're expecting. And in order to address that, historically, you've had to use a for each loop. Now, of course, the challenge with the for each loop, where it does iterates individually over the elements, is that that's a much more costly operation. So what we wanted to introduce, and we are with Q4 release, is this notion of the combination results. So an explicit match or unmatched condition that will allow you to bypass the Cartesian processing and won't require the for each loop and the additional processing costs associated with the for each loop. So let's jump over and get a better understanding of how we might utilize this in practice. So where this typically comes into play is when you have a dimension and you're trying to do a conditional statement to check its validity against an alternate dimension's attribute value, right? So in this case, I have a country, an entity, and I want to check an intercompany dimension, the attribute of the intercompany dimension, right? That it matches my primary dimension. So just some scenarios where this is useful. Of course, the first is that I want to do an explicit matching between the primary dimension and the other dimension's attribute. Likewise, I want to do an unmatched condition between the primary dimension and the other dimension's attribute. Or maybe I want to use it to do some time matching. I could utilize this capability for that as well. Okay, so let's show some examples of how this actually will work in practice. So what I want to do, of course, is run my primary data action, which will actually check explicitly the principal entry against the intercompany's equivalent attribute. So in this case, what I expect to see when I run this exact combination match is that the Korea will match with the Korea value and the Germany will match with the Germany value, and I'll see $100 in these two combinations. So this is the explicit match where my primary entity matches the attribute in the other dimension. Now conversely, I might want to do the inverse of that, which is the unmatched scenario. So I'll run this data action where I want the unmatched combinations. If I run that, I should get all combinations that don't match where Korea specifically equals the attribute in the alternate dimension and Germany as well. And we'll see that the two that I had before are the ones that are excluded, which is the inversion of what I'm looking for. The final thing I want to do is run the equals under the Cartesian scenario. So what we would expect to see today if you were not using the for each loop. Right? And that's the last data action. And what it does is check whether there's a match condition at all. And if that's true, then it's treated as true for all other elements in the other dimension. Right? And this creates an unexpected result where Korea and Germany are populated for all scenarios in the other dimension, because there is a match condition, but it ends up treating all elements as a single group because of the Cartesian processing. And so this is our new conditional logic we're introducing as part of our advanced formulas for our Q4 release. Next, we've made some significant improvements to the usability of the new line. So now when you insert a new line, it will automatically populate all members to the right of the dimension in which you've selected for insertion, and that will be based on the specific row that you chose to perform the insertion operation on. So it will automatically pre-fill the members to the right, assuming they're leaf members. For any non-leaf members, those elements will still be left blank. And of course, once you insert the new lines, you'll have the ability to remap any existing dimensions that you want. But in most cases, if you don't need to make adjustments to those other dimensions, this is going to save significant time. So let's jump over and see this in action. So in this example, I have a table with 3 dimensions on the row. And if I go ahead on this line with Bus Bikes Inc., I was to right click and insert a new line. What's going to happen is it's going to take the context of the line that I have and it's going to insert the same members to the right of that element that I selected. So in this case, Bike RC002 and Gross Sales are inserted by default because they're to the right of the insertion point. And I can go ahead and remap the entity element that I want. Likewise, if on this specific row where I have cross bikes P010, I was to right click on the entity, I again will inherit the dimensions to the right of the entity dimension. I can go ahead and remap the entity. And of course, I would have the ability to remap any of the existing product or account if I wanted to. Now, if I was to choose a row with the product, and I selected the product context, I'll get the members to the right of that. In this case, that would be only gross sales. And I can select a new product. And then finally, of course, this works for leaf members. But if I was to click on a row where the dimensions to the right include a node or a parent, that will not be automatically populated. So in this case, I would be forced to choose the entity and the product, but the account would inherit automatically. So these are the enhancements to the new line as part of our Q4 2023 QRC release.
Hello, Stuart. In this enhancement, we're going to be discussing the removal of the restriction that you have to deselect at least one member when you include all members part of a story filter input control. So this will make it even easier to pass data from a story, for example, into a data action. So let's take a look. Here we have our simple story where we are going to be copying our actuals over from 2022 to 2023. We're going to be assigning a marketing spend here to the unassigned and then doing an allocation to the accessories product line. We've also added an input control to this story, and then you can see that we've added the all member option here as well. So the thing that's new here is that when we go to map our data action in with our story filters input control, you can now see that we can perform this mapping here, story filter input control, directly, and it'll map into this product. And certainly if we wanted to, we could do a manual mapping as well, and you can see the all member selection if you wanted to select that option as well. So we'll just set it back to the input control. We're going to take a look at the second half of this, which is the data action, and look at what we need to configure as part of that. The configuration here is pretty straightforward. We're going to go into our parameters. We've already created one for product, and you can see the way we've defined it. So we've given it a name, we've set our model that we're looking at, which dimension. In this case, we're working off of our product hierarchy H2, and with this we can select a level. And note that the ability to select all members will depend on some of these options as well. For instance, if I select single for cardinality, it will not be the all member. Likewise, if we go into the default member, you'll see that you will not have the option of selecting the all member here as either. And this has to do with some compatibility reasons with our Office client as well. So now we look at, once we've defined this parameter, how can we use it? In this case, we've connected it in with the filter. And so we have, we could select by members, but now we can select this parameter here as well. And we've done this for both an advanced filter here as well as an allocation. And you can, actually we didn't include an allocation just because we have a very defined allocation that didn't need the all member selection. But if you have other data actions that are running here that would benefit from that, certainly you could link them into it as well for copy actions, cross model copies, and allocations here as well. So go back to our original report, and then we'll execute our data action. And part of the benefit of allowing the all members is certainly if you're adding new products in here, the all members would certainly pick up those new products that have been added. So we can execute our data action here. You can see that we have the all members for the product, and it'll execute just fine.
So the next enhancement I want to talk about is improvements we have to the forecast layout. And with the Q4 release, we're going to allow you to reference week granularity within the forecast layout. So if you have a model that either has a date dimension that is of week granularity or day granularity, you'll now be able to reference the week granularity within the forecast layout. Now, you'll be able to do this for any of the current date range, so the active date range, the look back periods, or the look ahead periods. You can select week granularity and the specific number of weeks that you want to see. So let's jump over and see this in action. So in my example, I have a forecast layout that's currently set by month. The underlying model is weekly. If we open up the forecast layout, what I've done is define the current quarter by month, and then I've looked forward and back 3 months, right? So I should have 9 months in my forecast layout by month. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the granularity for the current quarter that I'm looking at in the forecast layout to week. And when I do that, what I'll see is that I have 3 months preceding the forecast layout period, which is by month. Then my current quarter is by week. And of course, after the current quarter, I also have 3 more months that I display. But I'm not limited to do this, of course. I can change either the look forward or look back periods to also refer to week granularity. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll change the look back to be 6 weeks and also the look forward to be 6 weeks. So now my entire forecast layout is by week, preceding the current quarter and then after the current quarter. And so this is the enhancement to our forecast layout to support week granularity with the Q4 2023 QRC release. So in this segment, I want to cover several enhancements we have coming to the calendar as part of our Q4 release. The first of these is the ability to reset a custom instance of a series. So you may have made changes to a specific instance of a given series, and you want to actually reset that custom instance to the original series settings. You're going to be able to do that now in a fairly straightforward manner. You'll have the ability to more easily attach and detach child events from a given process, so you can do it directly from within the process itself. With Q4, we're improving task duration tracking because we're introducing specific properties for each task for the actual start and end dates. So up until this point, it's been the expected start and end dates. Now you can display either the expected start and end dates and or the actual start and end dates. And if you show the actual start and end dates, you can see the actual task duration. Finally, I want to cover some improvements to time zone support within the calendar. So that is the ability for task series to display the creation time zone and support for daylight savings time. So if you have a switchover between standard and daylight saving time or vice versa, your task will execute at the consistent time even when it has to cross a switchover between daylight savings time and standard time. So with that, let's jump over and see these enhancements in action. The first calendar task enhancement I want to cover is the ability to reset a specific instance of a series back to the properties of the overarching series. So in this example, what I'll do is I'm going to remove the Plan B viewer from one instance of the series. You'll see that I get this information warning saying that I'm going to decouple this from the series with this change. Once I commit that, it'll jump down. You'll see that Plan B is no longer a viewer for this instance of the series. And if I was to select another instance, of course, he will still be a viewer in those other instances. And now what I can do is I can go back to the original instance that I modified and I can click the reset occurrence. If I click that, you'll see that I get a reset warning that'll say it's going to reset it to the overall series. And once I do that, Plan B will again be the viewer for this instance. But that's not all. I can actually do this for multiple tasks simultaneously. So if I was to modify multiple instances, of course, I'm doing this in the individual instances themselves, but what I can do afterwards is pivot over to look at the series, the entire series. And when I do that, I can reset the series itself. If I do that, I'll get an indicator saying that all future instances that are decoupled will be reset. And this way I can reset multiple instances at the same time. Okay. So this is the a reset option for individual instances that have been decoupled from the overall task series. Next, I want to cover the changes to the process and management of child tasks. So that's the ability to add child tasks directly from within the process itself, which I couldn't do previously. So if you'll see in my example, I scroll down to direct child events. I now have the ability to add child events. I can select which individual children I want to add. And of course, I have not only the ability to add them, but I can manage them in general here. So if I want to remove specific child tasks, I can do that as well. Okay, so these are the enhancements to the management of children directly from the process within the calendar. Next enhancement I want to cover is improvements we've made to task tracking. And this is via the introduction of explicit start and end date properties for the tasks. So up until this point, we've had a start and end date, but that's really been the planned start and end date. Now you see we've relabeled that. So we do have a planned start and end date. This is when it was scheduled for. And we have an actual start and end date for the actual date that it was instantiated and completed. And we can do effective duration tracking. So you'll see in my example, I have one task that's delayed because it hasn't started yet. It's after the original planned start date. I also have a single task that I've actually gone ahead and submitted, and you can see that it was submitted only 1 minute after it was started, and so the duration of the task is actually only 1 minute long. So the other nice enhancement that comes along with this is that I do have time status filtering, right? So if I want to just filter delayed tasks, those that haven't started based on an anticipated planned start date, it's easy for me to do that. So the final enhancements I want to cover today is improvements to time zone support within the calendar. So you'll see in this case, I have a process and I can see the recurrence, and under the recurrence, I can see where the task was originally scheduled, the specific time zone that it was scheduled in. And perhaps what's more important is that this schedule does now respect daylight savings time or cutover between standard time and daylight savings time, or vice versa. So if I schedule at 2 o'clock, it will always run at 2 o'clock, even if there is a time shift at some point. So this covers the enhancements we have coming as part of the calendar for our Q4 2023 QRC release. We've made some enhancements to the API step within multi-actions as part of this Q4 release. We're introducing support for CSRF, across-site forgery tokens. So this, of course, improves overall security and extends the compatibility of this API step. Now, there are going to be two options for this. You can either explicitly specify the CSRF URL, or if you don't do that, it will try to fetch the token via the primary URL. So let's jump over and just look at this in the multi-action designer. So I'm in my multi-action designer and I have a single step in my multi-action, and that step is an API call. When I open that up, you'll see in the designer that I have two new options. One is a checkbox for require CSRF token, and the second is a text box to paste in the CSRF token URL. If I enable the checkbox, then I have two options. The first is to leave the token URL blank, right? And if I leave it blank, then it will use the primary API URL to try to retrieve the security token. If I populate it, then it will use the explicit URL to retrieve the security token. And so providing that option for the explicit token URL should make this a lot more flexible. And so this is the CSRF token support as part of our multi-action API step with the Q4 release.
Hello, my name is Derek Johnson. In this enhancement, we're looking at how we're now going to allow partial publishing in our multi-actions as part of the version management step. So let's take a look. So here's a report that we're going to be working with, and the setup is intentionally simple. So what we're going to do is copy the actuals over to plan for 2022 and 2023. We're going to establish a marketing budget of $385,000, and we're going to use an allocation rule to disaggregate that marketing expense to a product line accessories. So we're not going to necessarily go into the logic of our data actions, but we're going to focus on our publishing strategies. So let's take a look. So the first thing I'd like to do is just show the data action and some of the options that are available. And this should be a recap from last quarter's innovation where we added the option to publish and ignore warnings. And that's the same option you have when you publish manually. You can also have the publish fail if there's any kind of warnings or not to do any publishing activity. And we have the same option when we look at a multi-provider. So instead of configuring this in the action pane here on the right, we can look at the multi-action definition. And here you can see that we have our data actions where we're doing our logic that we'll be seeing, and we're not going to publish here. Instead, we have a version management step that we can add as part of our multi-action where we can just point to a particular model. In this case, I set the plan, you could use a parameter, and we have our publishing strategies, which are publish and ignore warnings or publish and fail if there's any kind of issues. If you did not want to publish, you would simply not include the version management step. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run the data action. So you can see that we've copied over our actuals to plan 2022 and 2023. We set up our marketing spend, and then we've allocated to our product line of accessories as discussed. So what we'd like to do now is make some changes to this plan here, and by locking it, and then we can just show the partial publish. So we're going to take a look at that using another user. But before we do that, we're going to go to the model, and we're going to set up a data lock. So the data lock that we set up in this case is going to be intentionally simple, where we're just going to take the plan values and simply lock that for 2023, or excuse me, 2022. Now we're looking at our second user here, who may already have been in the middle of a planning session, and we're going to kind of walk through things from their perspective. So the first thing we're going to do is open up the version management, and we'll just show that they have a active version here that's in edit mode. Of course, no information has been added to that. If we wanted to, we could certainly create another one. But we've got our version locked here for 2022, and you can see that we can't do any entry. And so now what we're going to do is just run our data action. We're expecting it to try to publish 2022 and 2023 for our plan, and then only publish the 23 results because 2022 is locked. And here you can see this is exactly what happened. Our actuals have been copied over to 2022 and 2023, but because 2022 is locked, we are only able to save the values or publish the values for 2023. Hello, Sturk. In this session, we're going to be looking at one of the enhancements we made to make it even easier to create the planning area based on table point of view. So you're still going to need to set up the planning area as part of your model definition. And with that, you can select a combination of using DAC or data locking to help guide what's available for planning. And then once you do that, you'll go into the story, and as part of the builder panel, you're going to be able to select a new option to auto-generate based on the table content. So this is going to take into account story filters, input controls, and any other explicit table filtering. So here we're going to look at a story where we have two tables. So we have a table showing all of our business units, and we're just showing the operating income for our plan year of 2023. And we have another table that we've added into the story that's just going to be filtered on the Americas. So as part of this, what we want to do is to set the auto generate based on the table context, which we'll do. We've assigned it to this table. And really the trigger is going to be when we start planning. So I'll also change the point of view here of this story so we can look at the version management. So you can see we're not in edit mode at this time. We can simply start planning in the table, and then without being prompted, it's automatically going to add us into edit mode. And you can see that we've now been added into edit mode, and then anything on this table here has been added to definition. We'll take a look at the version management for that. But you can also see on our other tables that are included within the story that the Americas in this case are available for editing, but the other regions or business units are outside of the planning area for changes. If we want to, we can also look at the definition here by going into the version management and details. And you can see what was taken into consideration, and these are the filters that have been placed on this particular table. So this feature will also be used in conjunction with a feature that we're also going to be releasing in the next quarter, which is the dynamic expansion. With the dynamic expansion, you can start to change the scope of your planning area once it's defined, and in this case include additional regions. So that will be a forthcoming enhancement. Thank you. Hello, this is Derek. In this discussion, we're going to be looking at some of the enhancements we've made to our story API as it relates to version management. So this is setting the start edit for our public versions, as well as when we create private versions, is setting the planning area there as well. So a lot of exciting things that we're going to be showing in this video. Fortunately, it's could be very lengthy, so what we've chosen to do is show you what some of the options are in terms of a number of buttons that we've created for setting the planning area, but we've included the coding here as well. So if you look on the right hand side for each of the underlying options, we just show a little snippet of coding that we've used to set the planning area for both the public version as well as when we create the private version. We'll take a look and execute one for both the public and as well private version. Thank you, and let's take a look. Now let's take a look at an example. So just to kind of backtrack on when we thought about our PowerPoint, there was a number of sections that were related to coding, and you can see the buttons here. They correspond to our PowerPoint and the different coding blocks that were included there as well. So I did want to include an example because I think it's very easy to use the story API, and some examples are certainly very helpful. So I'm only really going to focus on one example here. And this is a case where we want to plan on or set up a custom planning area based on a public version. So I think this is really probably the most complex example of the group here, and it's very easy to do this. So to do this, first I'm just going to select this option, but then I want to discuss what we're doing as part of our filtering action. Is we're filtering out products, so we're going to remove the filter on product here, and what this is going to allow us to do is if we're in a planning scenario and let's say we're very narrowly focused on a few product groups, but we would like to expand that in the future, we could do that right here. So we could, by removing product, will allow us in this case to plan on accessories at a later time, and just makes it a little bit more flexible for planning. We could also choose to restrict from our planning area like the marketing account, which is not shown here based on our product selections, but that'll help if we want to kind of restrict planners to a certain region of things that they should be planning, even though it may be open from a data locking perspective, and perhaps even a security perspective as well. So we're just going to take a look at the benefit here. If we add in accounts here as well, we've created this planning area, you'll see that we could be planning on this as well. So it just allows us to kind of expand beyond the table point of view to make a little bit more flexible definition of how we'd like to define our planning area. And you'll note that our planning areas will only consist of 2023, and then we're only going to allow planning on the revenue account. So we're going to take a quick look at the definition here, just so we can see this in action, how we set this up. So the first thing we're going to do is grab the planning filter type information from table 1. We're going to then remove the filter on product, and then for the account dimension, we're going to filter on revenue, and then we're going to filter our date on 2023. So that's why you see the revenue and date in our details section of our planning area. Once we do that, we're going to just enable the start edit mode. We're going to use the change planning area, and then we're going to pass the filters to that so we can set our planning area for our what we've customized. So the other planning options are pretty straightforward, but I did want to kind of call this out. We can do the same type of thing when we create a private version. We can create a private version off of plan, copy all data. We could also create a planning version based on the recommended planning area. We can create a private version and then have that based on the visible data as well. So that'll be what you can change as part of your private version. And last, we can create a private version where the planning area is set to for any kind of customized selections as well. So in that case, we could remove the product dimension, focus on some sort of calendar year and account structure as well, or however else we would like to filter it. So it really gives us a lot of options for creating our planning areas and customizing it for our needs.
Hello, I'm Jeanne, Product Manager from SAP Analytics Cloud team. I want to introduce you the new features for the Microsoft Office integration part that we release with QRC4. First, we introduced the concept of designer and viewer in the Excel add-in part. So this will be defined first on SAP Analytics Cloud permission roles, and you have now a new add-in workbook privilege that you can retrieve in the list of privileges. Then an end user will be defined as a viewer, which means he won't be able to change the report structures except the parts defined by the administrator. The administrator here is defined as a power user or designer as well on the permission side in SAP Analytics Cloud. This is really an important feature to support scenarios where a designer are creating templates for the end user, and then the end user can only consume the template created for him. Next feature we release is the capability to select the data action parameters directly based on the filters applied on the report. So in the Excel, you can run data action created in SAP Analytics Cloud, and of course you can also define the parameters of the data action. This new capability makes the definition of the data action much more flexible because there is no need to specify it. You just have to specify that you want to apply the table filters and then run the data action itself. Next, we continue to improve the member selector where you do select the member in your dimension, adding the capability to use the copy-paste function from Excel. So based on the list that you receive in a mail or in Excel file or anywhere in your clipboard, you can just paste it in your member selector and then the report will be based on that selection. Here you can see, based on the copy-paste menu that is new on the member selector, how I can copy a list of products and the selection is applied already in my dimension, and when I go back to the report here, you will see the results display as well on the report. Another feature we introduce, it's the undo and redo menu that you can see on the top on the ribbon here. Then any action done specific to the add-in can be cancelled or can be played again. For the example here, we cancel the copy-paste action we did just before, and then you can see after the clicking on the undo menu that the report now is again on the previous state before the copy action. With QRC4, we introduce a new custom function named SAP Time of Death. With this formula, it's then easy to retrieve and calculate dynamically a time dimension member. This is of course based on the reference date, and then the filter is applied on the Excel report. Let's see how it works in the product. So here, changing the date, reference date, I can, based on my time offset formula that you can see here applied in the report on the top. So based on this time reference date, I can just decide that I want to see the 3 periods after the reference date, and then my report is updated. In this example, I'm using a SAP get data to create the report. So the report is based on formula. But of course, this formula works as well with tables. So another example here, where based on the same period of time, I just decided to retrieve period in the past. And then this is applied, of course, to my report. So this is really flexible way to define the time dimension in the report or based on SAP get data formulas. Last important feature we deliver with QRC4 is this new live connectivity from the add-in Excel to BW or S/4HANA on-premise. These two live connectivity has to be defined in SAP Analytics Cloud, of course, as a tunnel connections. The workflow starts as usual. You have to search for your BW live system in this example. As soon as I have found it, I'm connecting directly to the query. Here the query contains variables, so I can also select some content for my variable. And then the queries will be displayed in the Excel add-in as any normal reports. I can show in the designer panel all the list of dimension and set filter for any dimension. So we can apply number formats. And this is reflected in the report already. Of course, as any source, I can add dimensions. So I'm retrieving the list of my query here, and I can select any dimension. So the purpose of this example is just to show you that based on BW or S/4HANA on-premise, you can leverage from any capabilities from the add-in. So here I'm just adding total on the top. I could also swap dimension, of course. I can also change the layout, of course, leverage from any custom function contained in the add-in. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching the updates for QRC4 2023. This is the last release of the year, and we hope our demos have helped you leverage the latest features in SAP Analytics Cloud in your organization. Remember to leave a like on this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Analytics Cloud. And stay tuned to see what's coming your way in 2024. Thanks again and see you next time.